I'm 74 years old, and I've been retired for 11 years now. 11 years. That's longer than some of the jobs I thought defined me. And I want to tell you something that took me most of my life to understand, not because I think you'll listen. I probably wouldn't have listened either, but because I've run out of excuses not to say it. I gave the best of myself to work. Not my worst, not my leftovers. The best. The sharpest hours of the morning. The clearest thinking. The energy I had at 34, at 41, at 49. That energy went to conference rooms and spreadsheets and performance reviews and projects that got shelved 6 months later anyway. I gave it willingly, proudly, even. And the day I retired, they threw me a small party in the break room. Grocery store cake. A card that 15 people signed. And that was it. By the following Monday, someone else was sitting at my desk. I don't say that to sound bitter. I'm not bitter anymore. But I think you should hear it plainly, because nobody said it to me. I started at that company when I was 28. My wife and I had just bought our first house. Our daughter was 2 years old. I remember thinking, this is it. This is where it starts. And I meant the life, not just the job. I thought they were the same thing. The work was good, actually. I was good at it. Numbers, logistics, moving things from one column to another in ways that made sense to people above me. I liked solving problems. I liked walking into a meeting with an answer when no one else had one. There's a feeling in that, a real feeling, and I don't want to pretend there wasn't. But somewhere in my 30s, the job stopped being something I did and became something I was. I started staying later than I needed to. Not because anyone asked me to, but because leaving at 5 felt like a statement I wasn't ready to make. Felt like admitting I wasn't serious. And I was serious. That mattered to me enormously, being seen as serious. My wife would have dinner on the table at 7. Sometimes I made it. Sometimes I called at 6:30 to say I was wrapping up and I'd be another hour. She would say okay. She always said okay. I didn't know for a long time how much was underneath that okay. My daughter was growing up in a way I kept meaning to pay more attention to. I was there. I want to be clear about that. I was present in the house. I coached 2 seasons of her soccer when she was 8 and 9. I drove her to things. I showed up. But showing up and being present are not the same thing, and I confused them for years. She'd try to tell me about school at dinner and I'd be thinking through something from the afternoon. A problem I hadn't solved yet. An email I needed to send. I'd nod. I'd ask a follow-up question that showed I'd heard the surface of what she said but missed everything underneath. She stopped trying to tell me things around the time she was 12 or 13. I told myself it was just that age. Kids pull away from their parents at that age. It wasn't only that. The promotions came. I want to be honest about that too, because I'm not telling a story about a man who sacrificed everything and got nothing. I got things. A better title every few years. More money. A parking spot that meant something to me in a way I'm now embarrassed to admit. The respect of people at work whose respect I wanted deeply and whose names I can only half remember now. I turned down a job offer in my early 40s. Another company, more money, but it would have meant moving. My wife wanted to go. Actually, I didn't know that until years later. She thought a change might be good for us. But I said the timing wasn't right. My project was at a critical stage. I'd just been given more responsibility. I told her we'd revisit it in a year or 2. We didn't revisit it. The window passed. That's how windows work, it turns out. They don't wait. My father died when I was 47. He'd been sick for 2 years, and I visited when I could, which was not as often as I told myself I would. He lived 4 hours away. I was busy. He understood. He was a working man himself. He always said he understood, and maybe he did, but understanding a thing and being okay with it are not the same thing either. The last real conversation I had with him, I was distracted. I remember standing in his kitchen, half listening to him talk about something from his own past, and I was thinking about a meeting I had that Friday. A meeting that, I promise you, I could not describe to you today if you ask me. I cannot tell you a single thing that was decided in that room. But I was already there in my head while my father was still talking. He died on a Tuesday morning in October. I drove up that night. I kept thinking, on that drive, about all the Saturdays I hadn't gone. Not because they were impossible, because they weren't urgent. He wasn't urgent. The work was urgent. The work was always urgent, until the day it wasn't anymore. I retired at 65 because my knees were bad and, honestly, because the company had shifted under me in ways I didn't fully understand. New leadership. New systems. I was expensive and not new. They were kind about it. Generous severance. A good letter of recommendation I never used. And that party with the grocery store cake. The first month at home, I kept waking up early out of habit. I'd sit in the kitchen at 6 in the morning with my coffee and wait for something to begin. Nothing began. The phone didn't ring with anything that needed me. My inbox was quiet. After 40 years of being needed before I'd finished my first cup of coffee, the silence was something I had not prepared for. I called the office once, about 2 months after I left. I said I was just checking in. The woman who answered, friendly, young, didn't know who I was. Not cruelly. Not dismissively. She just didn't know. And why would she? I'd been gone 2 months. The work had continued without me, as it always would have, as it always does. My wife and I had to learn how to be in the same house together. That sounds like a small thing. It wasn't. We'd been living parallel lives for so long that we'd developed separate rhythms, separate routines, separate ways of being alone that we'd never quite named. Suddenly we were together all the time, and we liked each other. I want to say that clearly, we liked each other, but would become somewhat like strangers who shared a house and a history. Getting back to each other took time. More time than I expected. My daughter and I are okay now. We worked at it. She has 2 kids of her own, and I love those grandchildren in a way that surprises me every time I see them. But there's an ease between her and my son-in-law that I study sometimes. The way he gets on the floor with them. The way he's just there, fully there, like he's not somewhere else in his head. I watch that and I feel something I don't quite have a word for. Not jealousy exactly. More like recognition. Like seeing, very clearly, a road you didn't take. The years I spent building that career, they're gone. The hours in those offices are gone. And if you had told me at 40 that the company would not remember me 18 months after I left, I would have found a polite way to disagree with you. I believed, in some part of myself I never really examined, that I mattered to that place in a permanent way. I didn't. I was useful. That's different from mattering. I'm not telling you to quit your job. I'm not telling you that work is meaningless or that ambition is a trap. I don't believe either of those things. What I'm telling you is that the life happening around your work, that's the part that doesn't have a backup copy. You can rebuild a career. You've seen people do it. You cannot rebuild a Tuesday in October when your father was still alive and still talking and you were still too busy to listen. The years I'm most grateful for now are the ones where I was least impressive to anyone outside my family. A week of vacation where I didn't check my phone. Driving my daughter to college and crying in the car on the way home in a way I hadn't let myself cry in years. A Saturday, just a regular Saturday, when my wife and I walked for 2 hours and talked about nothing important. Those are what I have. That's what's left. I'm 76. My wife's health is not great right now, and we don't talk about the timeline because there isn't much to say about it. We watch movies in the evenings. I make her tea. Sometimes we just sit in the same room without talking, and it's the most honest thing I've ever been part of. I think about the version of me at 38, sitting in some meeting that felt like the center of the world. I'd like to go back and sit down across from him. I wouldn't say much. Maybe nothing at all. Maybe I'd just ask him, "What happened today at dinner? What did your daughter say? What did your wife talk about while you were half listening?" And I'd see if he could tell me. If any of this reached you, if something here felt familiar, I'm not asking you to like anything or share anything. I'm just asking you to think about what happened today. Not at work. The other thing. Whatever it was that happened that you might not remember next week. See if you can hold on to it a little longer.